Hi, and welcome to The Social Angle, a podcast that helps promo pros gain an edge in the social media realm. I'm digital content director Vinny Driscoll, and on this episode, I am joined by editor and wordsmith Christine Shreve to talk about the importance of crafting well written and impactful social media copy. Christine, welcome to The Social Angle.
Well, thank you. And I'm calling myself a wordsmith from now on, by the way, because I love that. So
I love it too. And when I was looking through your profile for somebody for this topic, I really liked your about you page on your website,
well, thank
and I
you.
was like, she is definitely somebody who I want to pick the brain about because
Hmm.
this is a topic that I'm passionate about as well. This is editing, crafting great copy for social media, how important it is in the digital age where it just seems like everything that you see on social media has typos and grammar issues. So we're gonna get into that in a few minutes. But before we get started, can you take a minute to introduce yourself, your business, and how you found yourself in the promo industry?
My name is Christine Shreve, business. I'm the director of marketing and outreach for linnypenny.com and Applique Getaway, which is an industry trade show. I also own my own company, Christine Shreve Consulting, and I consult on marketing, social media, writing, anything basically about building your image, I guess you would say. How I got in the promo industry, we don't really know. Honestly, I took a job as director of marketing for a company that no longer exists called Enmart. I was their director of marketing for 14 years. They were a supplier for garment decoration more than anything, but I kind of just snuck in. And then I started getting mixed up with you promo people, and now I'm just here.
I
You're
love
stuck
it.
with me now.
I love it. I think we all have really great stories about how we got into the promo industry. I've been in the
Mhm.
industry for 15 years. The first year I was here, I hated it, but here I am 14 years later, and I love it. And I've heard of similar stories that are
Mhm.
really equally interesting about how people have found themselves sort of by accident in this industry, and then once they're in it, they really love it. So again, we have a great topic. We're going to talk about the importance of crafting well. Um, Written and impactful social media copy.
Mhm.
But before we get into the questions, Christine, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a poll that I ran. I ran a poll on my Twitter account earlier this week, and the question was, do spelling and grammar on social media matter to you? So here are the results, and I got quite a number of
Hmm.
hits on this one. So yes, very much was the number one answer. Got almost 50% of the vote.
Wow.
Somewhat got about 37% of the vote. Not at all, about 9%, and I barely notice about 4%. So the
Hmm.
overall majority of people seem to really care about spelling and grammar on social media. Do these results shock you?
They do, because I would have thought that there would be a higher percentage saying it doesn't matter. Because when I complain about it or take someone to task about it, the response I always get is, "Oh, it doesn't matter. Why are you worrying about this?" And to me, I'm a grammar Nazi. I don't love that phrase, but it's the only one I can think of from
Right.
way back. I was raised by librarians and teachers. So if you did not speak properly and write properly when I was growing up, you were in deep trouble.
Yeah, I came from the same sort of environment, very mindful of grammar. And you use that term,
Mm,
grammar Nazi. It's like it's still very popular on social media. You
yeah.
check out the hashtag, and you find people who sort of rant about poor grammar and typos. So your website, you have your own website for yourself.
Mhm.
It says you have been a writer and editor for as long as you can remember, and you place a high value on marketing copy. Why is that important to you?
I think well written copy can do so much for the message that you're trying to put out there. And it's really striking to me, and maybe I notice it more than most people would because words are what I do. But the wrong word or the wrong phrase in just the wrong place can throw everything off. And saying something that you think means what you want it to mean that doesn't mean what you want it to mean can can get you in a lot of trouble. So, word choice is really important. How words are put together is very important. And it also has a lot to do with the image that your company will have out there in the world, I think. I mean, there are some people who say, oh, it doesn't matter, whatever. If I don't write that well, it's not a big deal. And I think to some extent, as long as you have a basic mastery of, basic grammar, spelling, stuff like that, you're probably fine if your words don't sing, so to speak. But to me, I just think taking the time and effort to make sure that you're really crafting the message that you want to send is really important. And that means choosing the right words, using them in the right order, phrasing things the right way. And it's like music in a way. There's an art and a rhythm to that, I think.
Yeah, and I think, it's an important distinction to say that when we're talking about marketing copy, we're obviously talking about from a business perspective.
Yes.
Um, Social media has, multi-faceted components. There's
Sure.
personal, there's business, and I've watched how social media has evolved over the last, dozen years or so. And I've watched how some people treat their personal,
Mm-hmm.
copy differently from marketing copy. There are people who do, they have different personas. Like for instance, when I write on my social media personal accounts, I may not, you know, capitalize the first
Mm-hmm.
letter of a sentence. Like, or for, yeah. So to me, I feel like there's a difference there. Like you can have your own sort of style personally, but when it comes to marketing and your business, I think you have to really be mindful of what you're doing and making sure that the message is right the first time.
Well, and I think there's also kind of what you're describing is tends to be called code switching. Like you use the vernacular and the style of speech and whatever that
Right.
the world that you're in is using. They talk about it a lot with people who are Black or Latino or whoever it was, who talk and act one way at home, and then if they go to a predominantly white school or something, they may code switch to speak differently and act
Hmm.
a little differently. And I think it's the same thing with, there is a business vernacular, so to speak. There's a business language. And I think there's a personal language for a lot of people too. And personal may be a little more freewheeling, a little more colloquial.
Right.
Lots of big words I'm throwing out here, but I think, and business, there's a language that business people speak, and you don't have to love it, but you have to at least acknowledge that it exists.
Right. And then it's important too,
Yes.
because you are professional business. Even though you may be in a industry that may be less, tuned into
Mm-hmm.
the verbiage, and but it's still important that you get it right. So let me ask you about, when it comes to creating content for social media.
Sure.
Um, in today's, environment, it seems like the emphasis is on video and imagery. Everyone wants the visual, right? The great image, the great video, but without good supportive copy, there can be a disconnect with your audience. What are some tips on making sure your verbiage aligns with your creative?
I think and I have to say up front on this, I was a late adopter for the image part of it. I'm not a picture person. I'm not a video. I'm words all the way.
Right.
So it took me a while to figure out how to marry the two. And I don't know that I always even get it right now, but I think a lot of what you need to be aware of is make sure that there's a connection between whatever your imagery is and whatever your words are. There are sometimes people will put things up and they'll go, oh, the picture's just for attention and it doesn't have anything to do with the post.
Right.
Drives me nuts.
Yes,
I'm
I
like,
agree.
find a picture that goes with the post,
Right.
whatever make there be some connection between the two things. And I think also the other thing that people sometimes miss is that your picture has a style. You can do a picture that's really energetic with lots of color and lots of things going on in it, or a video, and your copy is going to want to be married to that a little bit. So
Right.
if you're doing a really energetic image, whatever it is, and I talk with my hands a lot, so
That's
just,
okay.
so if you're doing that, then you want to make sure that your copy is a little more energetic. And at the
Sure.
same time, if you're doing something that's a more somber picture or is more, um, formal for some reason, then you
Right.
want to make sure that your language is that way too. And I think there's an art to that. If you're marrying pictures and words, you have to be able to write to the attitude or the style of whatever your image is. And a lot of people just think, oh, I need an image, and they don't think about
Right.
kind of linking the two.
Yeah, I think you touched upon a lot there. So tone
I
is very
did.
important. I think tone is very important, especially when I use an example because I come from the news industry, where
Mm-hmm.
we had to be very mindful about whatever news we were promoting in social media. If it was something somber, death, using exclamation points,
Yeah.
there's a disconnect there, right? It doesn't look very good. So, but one of the things that drives me nuts is when somebody um, drops a link into social media and it pulls in an image and it pulls in the title of the story, and then they use the opportunity to for verbiage to just reuse the same title that's already being pulled in. To me, I think
Mm-hmm.
then you have the title of the story being pulled in, and then in your description area, it's the same title. To me, that's lazy and it's a missed opportunity. You want to kind of further almost come up with the deckline. It's like, here's a little bit more of a snippet about what's in this story. That's an opportunity to pull out
Or why it's important.
why it's
Why are
important.
you sharing it? Why do you think I need to know about this?
Right, and I think that's a missed opportunity because
Yeah.
you have a certain amount of real estate to work with on social media,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not given much because once you start creating too much copy, then it creates a more link. So you have to click
Mm-hmm.
down just to read more. So you have an opportunity there to really sell what you're pushing on social media, and I think it's sometimes I see a missed opportunity with businesses. They're just kind of lazy. They put in the link and they push, publish, and then the link is got the same title twice. To me, I'm like, no, 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 don't do that. Like, there's your
Mm-hmm.
perfect opportunity to kind of, give a little bit more information about why people should be taking that click.
Yeah.
So let's
Totally
talk.
would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, and look, we can go on for a while about marrying the image with the copy,
Mm-hmm.
or even with video. If you're creating a video, I mean, I can go on all day. Like, video and imagery, like keep the text off of both of those. Like, I think that when you put too much text on an image, it could be very detrimental to a post. It turns into almost like an ad. People see an image with
Mm-hmm.
a lot of text on it. Boom! It's like their eyes just glaze over. They don't want to. They don't want to see it because it looks like an ad. Keep the images clean of text. Videos too. You don't want to look like an ad when you're creating video.
I would agree with that.
All right, so let's talk about the messaging. It can be very persuasive and it can lead
Mm-hmm.
to engagement, like clicks and call to action, which we just discussed. Poor messaging, like typos and grammar, can completely derail a post's intent. What are some tools you'd recommend ensuring your copy is tight as can be?
I think the first thing, and it's really, really basic, but it's something that I forget to do sometimes, and it usually trips me up. Just take an extra second and read over what you typed. Because a lot of times people get in the I've got to post mode. I've got to post it right now. I've got
Right,
to do it right this minute. And especially, like, I know my personal kind of problem is I type really fast,
right,
especially when I'm in the kind of, I have a really, something I really want to say, and I'm just going to, and typing fast can lead to mistyping, not on
sure,
purpose, just happens. So I need to take a second and go back and read it. And sometimes, honestly, what I'll do is I'll type something up and then schedule it and then give it 5-10 minutes or whatever and go back and look at it just because I need the distance,
right,
because sometimes you don't see the typo right away. And then if I go read it and it's fine, I'll put it up. Sometimes I miss it and I have to go edit and fix it later. It happens. But I think that's one, is just, give yourself a little distance, even if you have to leave the thing on the screen and go away for a couple of minutes and then come back, just to make sure that you didn't put a typo in it. Um, I can't claim brevity is one of my strengths. It's not, because I'm a wordsmith. So I like words. But I think if you can get your message across in fewer words, that's probably a good thing. So sometimes the editor hat will come out and I'll type up what I want to say, and then I'll go back and go, okay, I don't need that sentence. Those three
Right.
words can go. This is redundant, whatever it is. And again, doesn't take a ton of time, but it just tightens the message up and gets the point across that you want to get across.
Right, right. There's a phrase that I didn't hear until I got into this industry, and it comes down to proofs.
Mhm.
Proofs of what you're doing for your business. Proof early and proof often.
Yep.
And I would take that into the same type of mindset that we're talking about here with copy. Make sure, like you said, you know, constantly edit yourself. I would also maybe even send it to somebody else and say, hey, what do you think about this? But also, I think it's important to use the tools that are available to you that are
Mhm.
very simple, like Grammarly. I don't know if you've got Grammarly on your computer, but Grammarly has been awesome. Like Grammarly integrates with everything that you're doing on your computer. Your Word documents, when you're typing, if you're typing in a social media uh, area, like in a social media box, it integrates in there. So it lets you know if you're spelling something wrong or something that doesn't
Mhm.
make sense. So to me, I think there's a lot that people can do on their own to make sure that they're avoiding those typos, those grammar mistakes,
Mhm.
because sometimes even I am like, is this the right subject verb agreement? I'm not even 100% sure. And then Grammarly will have that suggestion. I'll click on it. I'm like, oh, yeah. And then I'll Google it. I'm like, oh, my goodness, I was wrong on that. Probably not something
Mhm.
somebody would have called me out on, but it's still nice to know that, I was doing this wrong probably for the last 45 years of my life. So, to me, I feel like, Grammarly has certainly been one of those saving graces for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that people can do that often gets forgotten is know what you're trying to accomplish with what you're posting. I think that's something that people, I don't want to say people slap things up because I think that's kind of pejorative and I don't like that.
Right.
But I think sometimes people put things up maybe with an intention, but they don't necessarily craft the message that gets the result that they want.
Right.
So, like you were saying, maybe send it to somebody else. And I've been saying, take a minute and, so take an extra minute too and look at it and say, what am I trying to get this to do? And does this combination of images and words generate that result that I want? And it takes more thought, but it gets you better results. So,
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's no reason to not try to edit something,
mhm.
like just creating something and posting it. Yes, you can go back and you can edit it like in most social media platforms. You can't do it on Twitter. And that's been a source of a lot of frustration for me in the past where I make a typo on something in Twitter. It's already gotten a lot of great interaction. I've gotten,
Mhm.
10 likes, I've gotten comments, and I'm like, oh man, there's that glaring typo. There's nothing I could do. To me, I feel like, when you have that editing function or that feature on social media platforms, it makes it easy for you to be lazy and say, you know what, I'm just going to post this. And if I make a typo, I can go back later and change it. Um, so yeah, to me, I feel like, there should be emphasis on making sure that the copy is as good as it can be before it
Mhm.
goes out.
Right. I like this. I like the comment we got here too.
Or we got Lindsay Bond. She says,
Yeah.
do you use something like Hootsuite or Facebook and Meta Business to schedule out your posts? Yes, Lindsay. Thank you for your question. I actually use both of those. This new Facebook Meta Business has been, I don't know if you've gone into it, Christine, yet.
Mhm.
It's pretty amazing, and it rivals what you can do on Hootsuite. We also use Hootsuite, um, but yes, I think that what Facebook is doing in their business suite is pretty awesome. And if I were a company like Hootsuite, I'd be sweating because this is all free. This
Mhm.
Facebook Meta Business is definitely free. I use it and I love it. And I've been using it for about a week and a half, and it rivals what Hootsuite does. Now, Hootsuite obviously offers more than what Facebook does in terms of the capabilities, but for sure, that is something that if you're not using Facebook Meta, for your business to schedule content out, you should be looking into it. And if you're paying money for something that all you needed to do is schedule stuff, then for sure that is something I would look as a cost savings. So thank you for your comment, Lindsay. Now, Christine, I have to ask you now, we got to talk about creating great copy. And I know we've kind of touched upon a few things there, but do
Mhm.
you have any effective strategy for creating killer copy for social media?
Um, Honestly, the thing that I've learned over the years is that the best copy for me is the copy that sounds like me, if
Okay.
that makes sense. Um,
So Christine is the business. So you are the business.
well, the business or most of the jobs that I've had, I've been the face of the
Okay.
company. I've been the spokesperson. That's what I do now. That's what I did previously. So people got to know me. And so from my perspective and from the company's perspective, sounding like me and talking about the things that I would talk about was an effective strategy. And I think for most business owners, for small business owners anyway, that this may not work as well if you're a multinational company, but
Right.
for most of the business owners that we'd be dealing with in this space, um, sounding like yourself is a good thing.
Hmm.
And that means, and I guess maybe sounding like yourself isn't what I want to say as much as be genuine,
Yeah.
be true to who you are and what the values are as a company, and don't try to be really exciting and woo woo and fireworks all over the place if that's not who you are as a business, if that's not who you are as a person. A lot of people think that they have to build a persona
Right.
to be on social media, or they think they have to be an Instagram model or whatever and have this perfectly curated
Sure.
little world that they live in. And honestly, that's a lot of work. And I think people are getting less enamored of that, maybe I want to say. We know it's all fake. We know that you take 49 shots to get that one
Right.
perfect shot, and we know that your kitchen is barricaded for 3 days so you can get that perfect shot
Right.
of the cake and it's like it's lovely, but it's not sustainable for most
Right.
people.
So being genuine
Yeah,
is,
being
yeah.
genuine, and I think being genuine is also what helps people trust you. And we all know that businesses that are trusted are businesses that people buy from.
Right.
So,
I would say that, you want to know who your audience is
oh
on
yes.
the network. So if you have a younger audience, and a more, how should I say this, hip or trendy industry that
Right.
you're in, you can, use, and we're going to talk about something that segues into creating like colloquial verbiage and content. You can kind of use emojis and you can use
Mhm.
colloquial language in your marketing messages. And I think that it all really kind of comes down to who is your audience, who are you speaking to? And it could be you have different audiences on different networks. Like, for instance, LinkedIn is a little more buttoned up, a little more
Yeah.
professional, maybe less emojis, less colloquial verbiage there. Maybe Instagram is where you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of coming up with copy that's a little, more slangy. It's a little more fun. It's a little more light, and I think that's important to really know who you're talking to and what your audience is. I think is important because it's okay to change your marketing message based on platform. And
Oh,
I'm a big fan of that, actually.
I actually demand people do that. I hate people who schedule everything and it's the same
Right.
message on every platform and it's too long for some and drives me nuts. And I think what you just said, this is something I preach all the time, so I can't believe I missed it. You have to know your market before anything.
Yes.
This is the number one thing that it just aggravates the ever-loving crap out of me when I ask people. People will tell me why I'm doing social media and it's not working. Why doesn't this work? How come you're saying social media is so great? And I'll say, well, who are you trying to talk to? Well, everybody.
Can't
Okay,
please everybody, right?
there's your problem.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, you have to know your market. You have to understand them. And nobody's market, I hate to burst anybody's bubble who might be out there thinking this is true. Nobody's market is everybody.
Right.
I mean, not
100%.
even Campbell's Soup or Coca-Cola or
Right.
Nike, any of those people. Nobody's market is everybody.
Right. So knowing your audience, I think, is clutch in being able
Yeah.
to craft that marketing message. Um, so let's talk about the colloquial slang. Language like gonna, Gonna, and wanna, Wanna, and then you got the internet and the SMN shorthand like OMG. What are your thoughts on using that in your marketing messages? And I think we kind of touched upon that a little bit.
Yeah.
But what about you personally?
Personally, I think it depends a lot on your personal style and who you're talking to. If the audience that you're talking to is using those acronyms, I don't know what you call them, the internet
Sure.
shorthand, or they're using emojis, or they'll know what SMH means, or they'll know what OMG means,
Hmm.
then use them if you're comfortable using them. If it's not something that is comfortable to you for whatever the reason, if that's not how your language works, then that's something you need to look at. But I think the first thing is what we were just talking about.
Hmm.
Know how your audience talks. It's the code switching thing again. Understand how the group you're in speaks and learn how to speak like them. And if they use, SMH and OMG and LOL and, or rolling
WTF?
on the floor laughing or what ROFL or whatever it is,
Right.
use those. If
Right.
they don't, and I think again, it's also another case of what we were talking about earlier. If you're talking about something very solemn and something that has a lot of impact, then maybe you don't want to do that
Right.
because the language won't fit with the subject matter.
Right.
But so you have to be kind of aware of what kind of atmosphere you're trying to create and what your subject is. But I don't have any particular issue with it in terms of, gonna, wanna. I've used them myself occasionally
Sure.
when it was appropriate. But I think you need to be aware of the people to whom you're speaking, and you need to understand what their language is. I'm going to write a post differently if I'm speaking to, let's say, college professors than I am if I'm speaking to first year college students, most
Right.
likely,
Right.
because they speak differently.
Right. And they engage
So
differently. It's
yeah,
like,
and they engage differently.
yeah, and you
So
you may miss the opportunity to make a connection with a college student if you're a little too buttoned up, and conversely, you may fail to make a connection with a college professor if you're too loose. So I think it's very important that you know your audience. And look, people ask me all the time, well, how do I know who my audience is? And I think that's also a great question too.
mm,
And it's a subject for a different podcast. But to me, I can give you the shorthand. Like, you analytics are available to
mhm,
you through all the social media networks, and I would just do trial and error. Keep posting content, be consistent, try different messaging approaches, see what resonates, see what doesn't, see what hits. And look, it takes time, and that's another thing about social media, and a completely different topic we could do another day. It's like, so there's no magic bullet to social media. To me, I feel like you have to you have to keep at it. You have to keep working. It's going to take months. It's going to take
mhm,
possibly years. I see businesses get on social media, and after a month they say, this sucks, this doesn't work, this is garbage. And I'm like, well, how long did you try? I've been on for a month and I haven't gotten any sales. I'm like, well, what do you expect? Like, social media is not magic. Like, you have to work at it, you have to figure it out. You have to understand eventually who your audience is, and then once you know that, you can start to create content and craft the messaging to that audience, and then you're going to start to see results. And I think that's my like little rant for the day. Social media
well,
takes work. like anything else.
You've been sitting in the back of some of my lectures apparently, because you just basically gave one whole section of one of the lectures that I do pretty frequently. So, which is that, yeah, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You
Right,
have to
absolutely.
be prepared for the long term.
I
And
watched
that's
some of
one of
your
my huge pet peeves
yeah.
is people coming up to me and saying, well, social media doesn't work. Well, how long have you been posting? Well, I did 3 posts and I've been on for a month. And I'm like, well,
Yep.
gee, I don't know why people aren't talking to you.
Yes. Story of my life. I hear this story, it's as old as time. To me, I feel like,
Yeah.
but look, the people who get it, and have been doing social media for a long time, they really get it, and they've been doing
Oh,
some
yeah.
great things. So I have a couple more questions for you, Christine. So let me ask you this one. I know how I would answer, but I'm curious what you think. Is it ever acceptable to create a social media post without any type of messaging?
Without any type of messaging.
So in other words, you're just posting like an image, you're posting a link to something, you're posting a video. You have that opportunity to create a message there that's outside of what you're posting in terms of the creative. Is it ever acceptable to not use a message? Because I still see this happen all the time.
Okay, I'm going to go. There's a couple of things I want to approach about this. First of all, I think it depends on the platform a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You can get away with posting pictures without necessarily having copy on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
You can do videos on TikTok without any copy, I think, and that would potentially work.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have to be very well crafted. Video would probably work without any additional verbiage more than pictures would,
Right.
because video, you can put the message in the
Sure.
video.
I agree.
So I think in that sense, my answer is a qualified yes, depending on platform. In general, especially on Facebook and, well, Twitter, if you don't have words on Twitter, you're
Yeah.
wasting your time. There's
Like,
no
what are you
point to
doing?
that.
Yeah.
And Facebook, I tend to feel more like Facebook needs words, but that's me and I
Right.
like words. So I guess my answer is a qualified yes.
Yeah. I would go with it's never okay. Only because like I'm a word person. I feel like it's a missed opportunity if you don't at least take advantage. And I even think that just using an emoji sometimes, one emoji can say a lot more than just leaving the the area blank, the description blank. Now look, like even if something, it's a story about something solemn or somber, we talked
Mhm.
about even just a sad face, emoji.
Right.
Like that's conveying to people the way you're feeling about it. Like you're not just putting out a link to a sad story and you're just leaving it open to interpretation. To me, I feel like add something there. That's what it's
Mhm.
there for. And it's important. Look, is it okay? Yeah, possibly. Like you said with videos, there's always videos. To me, I think sometimes if it's video content, people don't even read the description. They go right into the
Right. They
video,
go right to the video.
especially when it's autoplay. You're scrolling through your feed. You don't even read the
Mhm.
description. So yeah, I can make a case for that. But when you have a link or you've got an image, add a little something to it.
Oh, if it's a link, definitely.
Yeah,
Because with a link, it's like, why is this here if you don't tell me why you thought it
right.
would be relevant or why you wanted me to see it? You know? So, yeah, I totally agree with you on links. So, like I said, qualified, yes. And I'm always probably going to lean more toward having additional commentary than not, just because I'm me. But, whoops, I don't know what happened there. Did you freeze? Did I freeze? Interesting. I'm not sure what
Hello,
happened.
hello. Are you there?
There we go. I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
sure. Did you freeze or did I freeze?
I think we both froze. I think we just had an unstable connection there for a second. So
Weird.
yeah, that's okay. When you're doing live video, chances are stuff like that's going to happen. So
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I've had hosts drop out. I've not been able to get into things. It all is what it is.
And again, that's another topic for another podcast.
Yeah, how
We've
to
got so many.
handle the unexpected
Yeah,
in live streams.
yeah. It's always a good time. So let me ask you one more question. This is a final fun question. What is your biggest pet peeve when it comes to misspellings? I know mine. I want to hear yours.
Ooh, misspellings.
Misspellings or grammar typos, mistakes.
Grammar, the one that gets me the most in terms of grammar is seen instead of saw.
Okay.
I seen something.
Uh-huh.
That one bugs me. Just I don't know why that particular one. Misspellings. Oh, wow, a lot of them. Capitalizing everything, not capitalizing what you should be
Right.
capitalizing.
Right.
um, I don't know if there's an actual like misspelled word that really bugs me, but misused grammar is, seen instead of saw, or apostrophes where they're not supposed to be.
Yes. Yes.
Using an apostrophe s to make something plural when that's not how it works
Right. Right. Right.
drives me insane.
And I think that's a very common mistake because that's how you do how that's how make possessives,
Yeah.
for everything else. But when it comes to a possessive is its. It is it apostrophe s, and I think a lot of people
Mm.
make that mistake. And I see that, and I'm like, ugh, it's
Yeah.
no apostrophe, or there's an apostrophe that should be there. For me, I think when I see issues with your and your,
Yeah.
your and you apostrophe re, that kind of drives me nuts. There and there. Those, I think those
Yeah.
are very common. I think those are ones that I see all the time, only because it's just part of the normal conversation and
Hmm.
comments, and even when it comes to business marketing copy, when I see those mistakes, I'm like, oh, like no, like that's the wrong there.
Yeah.
So we do have another comment from Eliza. She works for ASI. She writes, "Do you recommend any apps for grammar or proofreading?"
Hmm. Scrivener I've used, and I like it reasonably well. Honestly, I don't use a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm old enough that I'm kind of old school. I just do it by hand for the most part.
Right. Well, you and I are the same. We're a little bit older school. Eliza, she's a Gen Z, so the younger generation is always looking for those apps. I don't use any apps either. Grammarly, I know I have installed in my
Mhm.
um, my desktop, and it is a godsend. In terms of catching mistakes that I didn't think I would make, but there they are. I'm like, oh my goodness! Like when I'm writing copy, I'm like, I did make a mistake here. Good thing I have Grammarly installed, and it integrates with everything, social media, your Microsoft
Mhm.
Office. So to me, I think Grammarly is really worth your time. It's free. It's like it's just a plugin. So to me, I feel like you know take
Mhm.
advantage of that if you do a lot of work on your desktop. I'm sure they probably have an app. So if you're doing
Oh,
any
I'm sure.
writing on your phone, which a lot of people do, that's certainly helpful as well.
Yeah, I've used Scrivener to edit a couple books a couple of times. It's a decent software program if you're editing. Whether it would, well, for proofreading it would work because that's what I used it for basically. But honestly, like I said, I mean I started out, my first editing job. I was 16 and I was working in a newspaper room, and that was way back almost before computers. So we edited old school.
Yeah, totally. That's how I came up as well. Well, Christine, thank you so much for your time today. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
The easiest that, well, I'm on Facebook all the time, so you can always find me there. And I'm in multiple groups. I have a group called Women in Garment Decoration. If you're female, come join us. Um, there's the Women in Business page. There's my personal profile. You can find me in the Applique Getaway group, which is called On My Way to the Getaway. You can find me in the Lenny Penny group. Um, any of those would work. Or you can come to my website, christineshreve.com, and you can get in touch with me there.
Awesome. So, any final thoughts about proofing and editing?
Just do it. I think is the main thing. Please take that extra minute and make sure that you have gotten your message crafted correctly, because a lot of people want social media to do a lot, but they don't want to put a lot of effort into it. It's
Right.
worth the effort. Let's just say that.
Right. And you'll be thankful that you
That you
don't make
did.
any mistakes, and you get the
Yep.
messaging right the first time. All
Yep.
right, Christine, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on The Social Angle.